So there's something about holding a handheld mic that it's like my inner, like, I don't know, Flavor Flav comes out, and I'm just like, hey! So you should have gotten a paper version of what's up on screen, but if you want a digital version of it, as well as the slides, then you can text, and that's how to spell my name, Tamsen, to 6686. It's going to send you an immediate text back that asks for your email address. If you want the digital copy, give it. And then within a minute or two, you should get an email back. I promise you will not be automatically signed up for anything because I do not want the GDPR lawyers to come and shoot me in the face. You'll get an option. Okay. So earlier today, Joel Comm said something that I promise I didn't pay him to say, and that was that all marketers are storytellers. And in fact, we've had some incredible examples of that already today. So Rich told the story of John Henry, and Yuri brought up the myth of Icarus. And that made me realize, there's a difference between stories, just any old story, and great stories. Because the stories that last, the stories that get told and retold, are the stories that carry within them something irresistible, an irresistible idea. And so to talk about that in the context of today, how can you create not just an irresistible story around your idea, but make sure the idea behind it is irresistible? I'm going to tell a story. So this story, to bookend with Yuri, is another Greek myth. It's the myth of Theseus and the Minotaur, Minotaur's labyrinth. So Theseus had a goal. He wanted to save the city of Athens. But in order to do that, he had to slay a monster, the Minotaur, half man, half bull. The Minotaur looks a little coy there, like, hey. Not like scary Minotaur. But the thing is that over and over again, people had tried and failed to not just kill the Minotaur, but even find it. Because the Minotaur lived in a pitch black maze, one that was so complicated that the Minotaur couldn't even get out. And that's what Theseus realized, that if he really wanted to save the city, he needed to do something different. He needed to find a new way of doing something. And that's when he realized that the maze was just as important as the monster. He had to get back out. And what that led to was a difference in thinking. He realized, I need a tool for each task. And so he thought to himself, well, what should I bring? Actually, he didn't think for itself. To be honest, there was a woman involved, and she's like, dude, you need a sword? And you need a way to get through the maze. He's like, So she gave him a sword and a ball of red thread. Now, the red thread wasn't to tie around his finger and be like, hey, don't forget to kill the Minotaur. It was so he could trace his steps to the Minotaur and retrace his steps back out. And so in this one story, we have this amazing example of an irresistible idea that we need a tool for each task. But also, with this idea of the red thread, we have the secret to what can make our own ideas as irresistible as the lessons we heard today, as we can get success, but at what cost? John Henry. We can not make sure not to fly too high, but also not too low. As Yuri said, what choices are we going to make? So that's what we're talking about today, is how is it that we can figure out why and how stories and telling stories and ideas make a difference. And this is why it matters. Because people don't buy things. They buy ideas. They don't buy things. They buy the idea of what those things will do for them. So that means that we have to figure out, well, how do we do that? And so that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today, because every idea, every business, every message, every product, every service started with an idea, with someone saying, I'm trying to get something done, there's something that I want, and I'm not seeing the way that I want to get it done. I'm not seeing my option out there. I'm not seeing the thing for me. Would you agree? Everything starts with an idea? Yes? Say yes if you agree.
Yes.
Thank you. I know I can see you, but I want to hear you too. Okay. And so in this context, then, we have to figure out, why do we have these ideas? Because we want to change what people do. We want to change how they think. We want to change how they behave. So how do we do that? Well, let's fast forward from all those ancient stories, all those old stories, to the stories of ideas that, in fact, most of us have been a part of in one way or another, these irresistible ideas that have, in fact, changed thinking and behavior. So let me ask you this question. What are some of the most enduring marketing campaigns that you can think of? So we're all marketers, so what are they? Not just what are really sticky taglines, but campaigns that permanently changed how we think about something or what we do with something. What are some ideas? Apples think different, because what did that help us think differently about? Tech, right, that we can do something differently with it. It doesn't have to just to be mechanical and computational, that we can be creative with tech. We can do something different with it. Other ideas? There's no wrong way to eat a Reese's. And thus begins the theme of snacks you're going to be hearing all throughout the rest of this talk. Absolutely. Well, how did that help us change how we thought about Reese's? We can get it for anyone, and we can do it anytime, anywhere. We don't have to wait for, snack time. Every time is snack time. What was another one I heard someone call out? Just do it. This idea that we can change the idea of athleticism from the elite to the everyday, that all it takes is having the initiative and the opportunity to just do it. But in fact, I'm going to guess that the majority of people in this room were involved with another campaign that permanently changed just about everything. So to find out just how many of you, I want to know, by show of hands, how many of you were married or engaged. Now keep them up. If somewhere in that matrimonial transaction a diamond was involved. All right, still a majority. Thank you for your hands. Who told you to buy the diamond? They sure did. Those bastards. De Beers. Which I totally want to do this sometime in Chicago, because I'm always like, De Beers. I mean, I live in Boston, so it's more like, De Beers. Yeah, so, I like to joke that I've lived in Boston long enough to have a Bostonian alter ego named Karen O'Sullivan. She sometimes comes out, I'm just warning you. But yeah, De Beers. And what's fascinating about De Beers is, A, how long that tagline has been in place, and B, what it actually accomplished. That tagline came into play in 1947. And it changed everything. Because prior to the 1930s and 40s, people gave rings when they got engaged, but they weren't necessarily diamond rings. Now, this was a problem for De Beers because De Beers has the worldwide monopoly on diamonds. Now, this may not sound like too much of a problem. They're like, hey, you've got the only diamonds, except for the fact that diamonds on their own, outside of that monopoly, are inherently worthless. Anyone ever tried to resell a diamond? Oh, that's kind of a painful question, sorry. So I was telling this story one time, and someone said, well, actually, I did have to return a diamond. Thankfully, we realized before we actually got engaged this wasn't going to work out, and this person was still within the 30-day window. But if he hadn't been, that the value of the diamond would have dropped 80%. Now, why is that? Why doesn't De Beers want your diamond back? Because it's back in circulation. They don't want that, right? So if they're trying to figure out how do we drive up the value of the diamond, let's remember our econ class, right? One way is to restrict supply. So they're saying, please don't sell them back. Keep them. But there's something else on that chart, right? There's that one line for supply, but what's the other line that crosses supply? We've got supply and we've got demand. And so that's where De Beers was all about demand. So they started a content marketing campaign, in fact. They started making, and it was probably one of the very first influencer campaigns, because they started giving diamonds to famous people, to rich people. They wanted people to see diamonds and status associated with each other. And so they made sure that whenever anybody got engaged on film or whatever, that there was a big stinking diamond hanging out on the hand. And then in 1947, a diamond is forever. And even though you may now know that the diamond is inherently worthless, you're like, yeah, you can try to pry that diamond off my cold, dead hand. But why did it work? Why did it work? because they understood something fundamental. And I was delighted to hear Nancy Harhut say something similar to this in her session earlier today. Because you cannot create change. You can't make people change, which is a little ironic here at Agents of Change. But there is something that we as marketers can do, and we can do incredibly powerfully. And it's this: we can create the conditions for change. So we can't create change, we can only create the conditions for change. And we'll explore throughout today how it is that De Beers did it, but also how can you do it, because that's the key to making your idea, any idea, irresistible. Okay, but how did they do that? I'm like, thanks, I want to know. All right, well, the first thing they decided is, well, what is it that they want people to do? And in the case of De Beers, it's, well, we want people to buy diamond rings. But you notice that isn't the tagline. The tagline isn't De Beers, buy diamond rings. It's De Beers, a diamond is forever. So what does that work? But first they said, what do we need people to do? We need them to buy more diamond rings. So as you're thinking about your things, and this is where the sheet comes in, you can kind of keep a running tally. We've got 2 columns there. On the left, you can do De Beers. On the right, you can start thinking about your own concept here. And you can hint, it's called a red thread. The first thing you can fill out at the bottom is, what is the action that you're looking for? We want to start with the end in mind. Any good story, we know the person who writes it typically knows how it's going to end, and then you figure out how you get to that point. So that's what we're going to do, too. We're going to make a note of what's the action that we want people to take. Now, of course, it's like, well, how do we do that? How do we get people to make that action, take that action? Well, I can tell you how we don't do that, and that comes from personal experience. You may recognize this person up here. This is me 20 years and 50 pounds ago. I was overweight. I did not want to be overweight. I tried everything to not be overweight. Let's see, this was 20 years ago, mind you, so there were things involved like the cabbage soup diet and jazzercise, and the cabbage soup and jazzercise, which is really not a good combination. It's not good. Okay. But eventually, I tried so much stuff that it just wasn't working that I went to my doctor, and I wanted to find out, like, what's going on? Is it medication? What do I need to do? Doctor, what can I do? And with all the patience of somebody who has answered this question a million times, she looks at me and she says, don't eat so much. Thanks. You know, there was 2 reasons it didn't work. The first is, all right, how many people have a child? Seen a child? Okay. How well does it work when you tell your child, do this thing? Not well at all, right? You say, you're tired. They say, no, I'm not. And that's a legitimate psychological thing that we never grow out of. It's called psychological reactance. It's the thing that happens in your head the minute that someone tells you to do a thing, and your brain immediately goes, no. In fact, it's such a strong thing that it will make you not want to do a thing that you otherwise wanted to do. So if she says to me, don't eat so much, I'm going to do the exact opposite. Thanks very much. But the other reason why it didn't work is it didn't actually make sense to me at the time. Because when she said to me, don't eat so much, I was thinking to myself, well, I don't eat a lot. I mean, there's very, very small slices of cake. And actually that's true because, and we've referenced my husband several times now, but he can tell you that I eat like 8 times my weight in food now, and I eat more by volume now than I did 20 years and 50 pounds ago. So it really didn't make sense to me because that's not how I saw the world. I didn't see that I was doing something different, and this is the key to it all. How we see drives what we do. We will always act in a way that's consistent with how we see the world. Once I realized this was something that I then started to apply to my work as a marketer, as a brand and message strategist for 20 years. I worked with and for some amazing companies, and applying some of these lessons to the work that I did to try to figure out how do I help people see something that we were doing as irresistibly as we did. How did I have the opposite reaction of me to my doctor when she's like, don't eat so much, and I'm like, that was covered enough, right? I'm just making sure. Sometimes I'm in the South and I can't even do that. The other thing that I did with it was that about 4 years ago, I was asked to be the executive producer of TEDx Cambridge, which is the oldest TEDx locally organized TED Talk event in the world. And there, what I did was help to find and refine the ideas of the speakers and figure out how do we, in just 3 to 18 minutes, make those ideas irresistible to other people. 5 of those talks are now on TED.com. They have 9 million views. And the lessons that I learned there, I applied to myself. I, who said, okay, yeah, I'm not eating a lot of slices of cake, also said that I wasn't a runner. I'm still not sure that I am, because this is me, 3 years ago at the Boston Marathon 2014, crossing the finish line at the lightning quick pace of 5 hours and 29 minutes. But I was finisher 13,273, so yay. But this is the difference, and this is the change ultimately that all of those things represented. Was that you can't change what people do until you change how they see. So if we want to create change, all these ideas that we have, these new ways to get the things that we want, these ways that we have found to slay our own monsters, and the way that we want to give other people to do it, we can't actually get them to change until we get them to see differently. So that brings us back to this idea of ideas, because this is where our ideas came from. This is why we started a business. It's why you launched a product. It's why you work for the business that you work for, because you believe at some level, or at least you're paid to believe it, in the idea. And yet we think of ideas this way, that they occur to us in a flash, in a moment, that's like Newton with the apple or Archimedes in the bathtub. I just had to pause a moment, too, because if that's what Newton actually looked like, do you think we would have taken him seriously? You're like, yeah, sure, gravity, whatever, bud. All right. But see, here's the thing about ideas. Just like so much else that we do, they are built on a story. In fact, great ideas aren't found. They're built. They're built piece by piece by piece. That moment where you have the aha, the moment you said, this is the thing I need to do, the moment where it becomes impossible for you to imagine to do anything other than the new option, the different option, to start the new thing, to go the new way. That's simply the moment where the last piece of the story falls in place. So what does this mean for us? It means that if we want to create the change, if we want to change what people do by changing how they see, we need to recreate that story of the idea, the story that made the idea irresistible to us in the first place. We have to recreate it in their minds. Well, how do we do that? How do we actually build a story? Now, this can be very frustrating, people, because we've been talking about stories now for at least the 20 years that I've been in marketing and more. And, it can be really hard. People say, tell stories, tell stories, tell stories. Is anyone really frustrated? We're like, yeah, but how do I tell a story? Or if they do get the instructions on how to tell a story, it's like 17 bajillion steps of the hero's journey, and you're like, I don't know how to do that. I sell a widget. So here it's as simple as I can make it. I'm happy to tell you that if all great ideas are built, not found, and they are built on story, then we need to figure out, well, what are stories built on? And I'm delighted to tell you that stories are built on cake. Well, metaphorical cake, because all stories start with a quest. They start with a quest for something that people want, with the Holy Grail, Monty Python or otherwise. They start with something that people want, a question they're trying to have answered. Don was just talking about this in the last session, about where Google is going and where search is going, is people are searching because they are looking for something. All stories start with the identification of what people are looking for, this goal. So the goal back for De Beers was, well, what was the goal of the people that they eventually wanted to buy a diamond ring? To give or receive a symbol of commitment. Would you agree? And it wasn't, I want to buy a diamond ring. It was, I want to give or receive a symbol of my commitment. I want the best symbol of my commitment I can find. And that's the key when we're trying to ask yourself, so that's the next thing to fill in when we're trying to build the story of an idea, is what's their goal? What are they already looking for? What question are they already asking? Because it's a lot easier to get someone to look at your answer if it's for a question they're asking than to try to get them to ask a new question. Would you agree? Yes. Okay, so the next thing we say, okay, what's their goal? Now, you might say, well, I've been studying story and there's a problem. Yes, there is a problem. So we can all say it together. We can say 1, 2, 3, release the Kraken. Yes, and in every great story is a big problem. There's a problem that stands in the way of a goal. And sometimes it's known to the people that we're talking to. They know what the problem is, and they're really looking for your specific help on how to get past the problem. When it comes to a story of an idea, though, the Kraken looks like a really, really cute little rhino. This guy. Give it a minute. Oh, I get it. Like, he puts his horn in every picture because that's what he sees. Oh, okay, now they're like, yes, okay, I get it now. All right. So we are the rhino, like hashtag we are the rhino. Like, this is all of us. This is marketers, like we put our stuff in front of everything. We're like, our thing is the answer to everything. Don't you see it? And they don't see it. They're looking at the landscape outside. And this is what we have to understand, is that it's not that we've got anything else going on that's wrong necessarily. It's that people don't see things the way we see them because of how they're already looking at the world. So when it comes to the story of an idea, think about it. The reason why it started was because there was a problem of perspective. People were looking at things one way, but you or your business saw it another. And that's where the beginning of the idea really started. I like to explain it this way. Anyone know who this is? Mae West. Close to Marlene Dietrich. Mae West, yes. So Mae West, a film star of the 1930s and 40s, known for wonderful lines like, I used to be Snow White, but I drifted. So she was a bit of a screen siren, let's call it. And so this was a movie still from a movie she was in 1934 called I'm No Angel. So publicity still was in lots and lots of newspapers. Lots of people saw it. They're like, oh, yay, Mae West, let's go to the movies. We want to see her. But somebody else saw that same newspaper and saw something very, very different. A very famous person actually saw her face and saw something very, very different. In fact, this is what he saw. Salvador Dali, yes, that was the famous person, the Catalonian artist who looks at Mae West's face and goes, that looks like an apartment. I'm going to paint it. There it is. Sometimes people are like, Dali, and I'm like, he's the one that did the melting clocks that were on your freshman dorm room poster? Yeah, okay. But then actually, a few years after that, he built the room. So this is the reconstructed room at the Dali Museum in Catalonia. And like, imagine if you're a fan of Dali or Mae West or surrealist apartments, and you're saying, okay, I want to see this. Now you can see that constructed-wise, you know, the curtains are the hair, and the paintings are her eyes, and the hearth is her nose, and she's this awesome lip couch. But what happens if you enter the room this way? All the pieces are there, but you're not going to see it unless you're oriented the right way. You are looking for the same thing. You're looking for Mae West. You're looking for the surrealist apartment, but you're not going to see it if you look at that different way. And this is where the key really starts. What I said, or that story, the idea starts because your audience, you're looking at the same things, but you're focused on different aspects. And that is what we have to solve for, because if we go back to Theseus and the Minotaur, there's always two parts. Most people were focused on the Minotaur, he was focused on the maze. We can look at it from the De Beers example. We can say most people were focused on the ring that matters rather than the fact that it's the kind of ring that matters. That's what De Beers wanted to say. It's not just the ring that matters, it's the kind of ring that matters. And for me, you might have been saying, well, Tamsen, the problem isn't how much cake you're having, it's the fact that it's cake, right? So there's something about not just quality of food, but, well, excuse me, I just took away my punchline. Okay, not just about the quantity of food, but yeah, hey, you guys are so smart. Wow, awesome. All right, so this is the next step for you when you're building the story of an idea or you're reconstructing the story of ideas. Say, what's the problem? What's that two-part problem of perspective? How are they looking at it? How are you looking at it? Now, is that enough? You're like, well, she put it on a slide, so I'm going to guess no. Correct. All right, so the next thing is that we have to make the problem impossible to ignore, just like the typo on the slide. True story, the very first time I used this slide, that was an actual accident. It was an actual typo. And then people were like, no, it was awesome. And I'm like, okay, I'll keep it. So we have to make the problem impossible to ignore, because there are plenty of times when you know the problem and you know the solution and you do nothing. I did not need my doctor to tell me not to eat so much, because do we all know the answer fundamentally when it comes to like anybody who's ever tried to get healthier about anything? We're always told we need to move more and eat less. So that wasn't the issue, right? That's not. Just having problem and solution is not the problem. We have to have something else. Yes, it always comes back to cake. So what I chose to do at the time was join Weight Watchers. This is not an endorsement of Weight Watchers, it's to illustrate a point. But at Weight Watchers, what they did was they gave every food a point value, a numerical number. Now, you can think of this in terms of keto with net carbs or just counting calories, but basically it was an equal way to look at all food. Every food was measured on the same way. And so I discovered when I joined Weight Watchers that the food on the left, do I have any loud and proud Weight Watchers here? Woo, yes. Sometimes that's also like asking like a similar question to how many people have returned a ring? How many points, just guess, how many points would you say, if all food is equal, how many points to the food on the left, the grapes, loud and proud Weight Watcher, how many points it's? 0 points. I always want like a secret Weight Watcher handshake symbol thing. All right. Now, you might say, all right, well, see, she said don't eat so much, so it must be the quantity thing. So, but what happens if the same food, and it's different format, same quantity, I've got about a handful of grapes on the left and a handful of raisins on the right. Wild guess. How many points would you guess are in the raisins on the right? 23. What? So that was what helped me start to say it's not just about quantity. It is about quality. And not just pure quality, because, raisins aren't unhealthy. Because you know what I found out? You know what else is 23 points? Yes! God, it's awesome. So it meant that it wasn't that I stopped eating cake. It just meant that if I had cake that day, I ate a lot of grapes. But all of a sudden, I could figure out, how do I make this work for me? And this is what we have to understand. In every great story, there is a moment of truth. There is some new piece of information that is introduced that makes it impossible for the hero, the main character, to continue on without answering some kind of fundamental question. Nancy put this beautifully in her session earlier today. She said, stories allow people to draw their own conclusions, and people rarely argue with their own conclusions. This moment of truth, this is the third piece as we're building from the top that we need to put down there, this thing that makes it impossible to ignore, that makes inaction impossible. And for me, this was the knowledge that if I looked at everything as an equal number, all of a sudden I couldn't ignore the quality side of the quantity-quality equation, just like a diamond is forever. So a truth is a universally known or accepted thing, a provable fact, something that you either come to believe or know to be true. When I was first putting this slide deck together, my, at the time, 9-year-old son walks up and goes, "A diamond is forever." "That's true, Mama." Oh, they got you already, buddy. I'm sorry. We were walking down the street the other day, and again, the ad was like, look, it's diamond is forever. And I'm like, oh, my Lord, what have I done? Okay. But once you've heard that, if you remember the goal to get the best symbol of your commitment, here's the moment of truth. Are you going to give her turquoise? You're like, well, I don't know, honey. The statistics aren't great. We're going to go for amethyst. No, because if you agree that a diamond is forever and your goal is the best symbol of commitment, it becomes impossible for you to ignore the kind of ring. Would you agree? I mean, you can choose to go no, but at the same time, you're like, okay, I'm doing this because I'm just, down with the marketing patriarchy, and I don't believe a diamond is forever, and I know what they're doing, and I'm not doing it. No. I get it. There's plenty of people are like, but the millennials aren't buying diamonds. I know, they're buying chocolate diamonds, so it's fine. All right, so this is the next step. We say, what is that truth? What is that piece of information that we can give them that they will readily agree with, or that we can prove to be true, that creates that moment that demands that question? Because the best stories, the great stories, ask questions that demand answers, that require answers. They ask questions that make inaction impossible. All right, so what comes next? Well, this is the other part of your great idea. Your idea was how to get a new, an unexpected, a different way to help people get something that they want, right? Something that they want is the goal. So what the next thing is the change in thinking, the change in behavior, the change you represent in the marketplace. This is the story of the idea. That's the thing that comes next. So for De Beers, it was to see the stone as the symbol. That was the shift that they were looking for. Yes, it's the kind of ring that matters, but it's the stone in particular, and a diamond is forever. Therefore, buy a diamond ring, and that's the last piece, is the action. So those last two pieces, one you've already filled in, the action, but the change is, what is that high-level shift in thinking, behavior, or approach that you're looking for, or that you represent? So how do we put it all together? Well, now we have all the pieces of how we've slayed our particular monster in the form of our idea. So like Theseus, we're going to retrace the steps of our red thread. And remember, where does it start? Cake. Goal. Goal. Followed by the goal. What's in the way of the goal? The kraken. The problem of perspective, that two-part piece. Then we get that truth, that moment of truth, that point of no return. We give them something they can't unhear, that makes inaction, that makes holding that previous perspective impossible, that brings us to the change and then to the action. Now, sometimes people say, well, okay, great, this is fine, I understand this, but how can I use this? And there's a couple different ways. One of the ways to use it is to kind of detective. How can you reconstruct why a brand is the brand that it is? So one of my favorite things on this is Starbucks versus Dunkin' Donuts. Dunks. So Starbucks is known, what are they known for having created? They're kind of, their brand is all about experience and the third place. Right? So you can reconstruct it because both Dunkin's and Starbucks have the initial goal from the audience perspective, from the customer perspective, which is, I want my coffee. Now, Starbucks looks at it and says, okay, well, what's the problem of perspective? Well, from Starbucks' perspective, it's something along the lines of, well, with a coffee break, the break is just as important as the coffee. Coffee and the break, two pieces. And the truth for Starbucks is that the experience flavors the coffee. And this is actually true because in blind taste tests, like repeatedly, Starbucks loses to Dunks, even amongst Starbucks drinkers. But you see how those things add up together and says, well, that's why Starbucks created the third place, a place to experience a break between home and office where you can enjoy your coffee in peace. Now, see, Dunkin's. How many Dunkin' people do I have? All right, love you people. Okay, same goal, buy coffee. Problem, all right, coffee is not just my routine, part of my routine, it's on the critical path of my routine. If I don't get my coffee my way, exactly when I want it, quickly, not good, right? So that means that it's not just the coffee isn't just part of the routine, it is the routine. It's the critical path of the routine. That's a two-part problem. The truth. Want to take a guess? Hint, what's their tagline? America. Which means they must believe their truth is that coffee is fuel. Which is why America runs on Dunkin'. Now, if you look at it from a detective standpoint, you can go back and say, well, oh, okay, now think about how those brands manifest. Starbucks, soft, squishy, food that you can eat all day. Dunkin's, hard, sticky, easily wiped down, food that you don't need a fork for. You ever notice that? Like everything at Dunkin's can be eaten with one hand. So you can use this to kind of deconstruct why is a brand a brand. You can deconstruct that. You can also use it to diagnose. So you can use it to diagnose, like the conversation I had with my doctor in the doctor's office. But we can also do this regularly with what's happening with our own marketing messages. Because if something isn't working, it's usually because one of those pieces, goal, problem, truth, change, isn't there, or it's out of order. So let's experiment with a different doctor's office. Jen, may I use you? Yes. So let's imagine you go to the doctor for a regular checkup. You come to see me for a regular checkup. Now, this should worry you because not a doctor, right? Okay. But let's just say, okay, so you come in, and before doing any kind of physical examination, I walk in and I say to you, so when would you like to schedule surgery? She's just laughing at me. Why? Why are you laughing at me? What kind of surgery? Right, because there's a question in your head, which is, and you just said it, why do I need it? Anybody else wondering if, like I just said to her, let's schedule surgery, you're going to stop and she's going to say, why, right? But think about how often, as marketers, as salespeople, we walk in and say the exact equivalent of, so, when would you like to schedule surgery? Before establishing the fact that it's going to help them achieve something they're looking for or that there's a problem that stands in the way. So let's just test this real quick. All right, so, okay, there's a spot on your back. When would you like to schedule surgery? Still more questions, right? So this is why, you see why just problem and solution doesn't work, because there's something else that has to be true. And it has to make sense. It has to be something that creates that question that demands an answer. Because if I go, it's lint, when would you like to schedule surgery? She's like, nope, not going to do it. Right? What do I have to tell you before you would even be willing to consider talking to me about why surgery might be the right answer? There has to be something about the nature of that, right? There has to be some kind of provable fact, some new piece of information that demands an answer. So you can use this, you can use these pieces of the red thread to go back and figure out why something isn't working. So, with the work that I do with clients, this is often what we're trying to figure out. And if it's not that, then it's the third way you can use this, which is to build a new idea or to build new content or new messaging around the stuff that you've already got. Now, as an example, not a client, but this is the About page from Thrive Global, which is Arianna Huffington's company. And you can see that when you look for this, ideas have stories everywhere. So the first line says, Thrive Global's mission is to end the stress and burnout epidemic. That sounds an awful like a goal. Yeah, it does, because that's something that people are looking for. If I'm bothered by stress and burnout, then now I'm interested. Second sentence, recent science has shown that the pervasive belief that burnout is the price we must pay for success is a delusion. So people are looking at things one way, oh, we're looking at it as another. That sounds an awful lot like a problem. Next, we know instead that when we prioritize our well-being, our decision-making, creativity, and productivity improve dramatically. That's their truth. That's their truth. That's the thing that here's this provable fact that says we know this will happen. So if we put that into place, then they say, okay, so therefore the change they represent, the reason why they exist, the reason behind the brand, the why behind their why is they're committed to accelerating the culture shift that allows people to reclaim their lives and move from surviving to thriving. That move from survive to thrive is the goal. Now, actually, you can look on, let's pour one out for SlideShare, but you can still find it there. SlideShare, you can find the pitch deck that Thrive Global used to raise on the upwards, I think, of about $7 million for one of their rounds of funding, and it follows the same pattern. The first slide after the title is what the goal is, what they're trying to solve for. The second slide is what the problem is. The third slide starts with we believe. Fourth slide is, what's the change? And then the rest of the deck is how they're going to do that, those actions that they're going to take. So on the sheet that I gave you on the back, you'll see that there's ways to put these things together. So you can use the top piece, what I call the red thread, which is to combine the goal and the problem, truth, or change to create that one-sentence explanation of what are we all about. For instance, this is all about how to build the story of an idea so we can create the conditions for change. They're all about how to use science-based solutions to end the stress and burnout epidemic. But you can also, at the bottom of the page, use it kind of like as a Mad Lib there, where you fill in the blanks so you can tell the story of the idea. And you can do it both from, let me tell the story, or from a branding opportunity, and I have them both there. So you just plug them in. Anyone remember Mad Libs? Fill in the blank? Yeah, okay, so you're the ones that saw the children. Okay, good. But sometimes people say, well, do I have to fill out a whole worksheet and do all this work every time? But no, you don't. So every week I put up a video, and I will tell you honestly that all I do is write down goal, problem, truth, change, action, and I'm even lazier than that. It's just GPTCA, and write down a couple quick notes, and without scripting it, that's what I give. It's let me understand really quickly what it is. So the level of preparation is just related to the level of stakes that you have going on with it. But ultimately, it comes down to this. We have the work that we do, and we do the work that we do for a reason, because we believe in those ideas. We believe in these ways that we have found to help people get what they want. And as a result of our belief in that, as a result of our belief in those ideas, we want to change what they do. We are the agents of change. But once we start to understand that we can't create change, we can only create the conditions for it, then we start to look at the other and the deeper, more important things. Because how we see drives what we do, and we can't change what people do until we change how they see. So what do we need to do? If we really want to change what people do, we need to build the story. We need to build the story of our idea. We need to recreate that incredible change that happened in our head for them. We need to find and build that red thread. Because you're the bringer of big ideas. You are the slayers of monsters. It's not a story. It's not a myth. And you do that. Then you do something really, really important. You don't just change what people do, you change how they see. And as far as I'm concerned, that's pretty much like having your cake and eating it too. Thanks very much.